On the occasion of my ordination, the Reverend Annie Holmes, who was serving at the church in Kenosha, gave me this volume called Earth Prayers. 365 prayers, poems, and invocations for honoring the earth. And this little volume has served as the closest thing to a Bible that I carry around in one volume. I have many scriptures and wise readings that I look from, but this volume contains a lot of wisdom. And when we went to General Assembly down in Louisville and the keynote speaker was Wendell Berry, I said, oh my goodness, that's the guy who's got lots of writings in this book. And today I'm going to share some of the readings from this book and some photos that I've taken. All the photos are photos that I've taken with the exception of one that has me in it, which was taken by my lovely wife, Gail. The first prayer is a Sanskrit salutation to the dawn from the Hindu tradition. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of our existence. Each day is a cycle of life. This picture is a sunrise at Davis Landing. So I've always liked this place. I thought it was well named. It's at the mouth of Burnett's Creek. A French trader started up a trading post there, and he married a Native American, and he had a daughter, and a subsequent trader came and married that daughter. That trader's name was John Davis, and he set up a ferry service so people could cross the river at this point. And that ferry existed from 1823 to 1912, when the railroad bridge was built. And that railroad bridge is no longer in service. It's now a pedestrian bridge, which makes up part of a park at that area. But there is a railroad bridge there, as well as the bridge for 9th Street, which came up from Lafayette, which was formed in 1838. And so now that's a boat launch for pleasure craft and family who spend the afternoon fishing. But the morning sun rises and reflects on the Wabash as it did centuries before and will centuries hence. The next prayer is from one of my favorite prophets, Walt Whitman. We are nature. Long have we been absent, but now we return. Nature has always called to me loudly. The wide expanse of Lake Huron with its mighty waves and infinite horizons. And before I moved here, I lived in North Carolina with its mountains. But in Indiana, nature speaks in whispers. In this picture, I'm standing at Fairfield Lakes, which are man-made expansions of floodwaters of the Wildcat Creek. It's a park north of Dayton, Indiana. And it mimics the glacial lakes that are on the Indiana-Michigan border. Small, shallow, serene. The not-so-distant opposite shoreline is easily seen. In contrast to the grandeur of a great lake, and likewise, the pretty prairie around it is plain, compared to the majesty of mountains. Splendor and spectacle demand nothing of an observer. They are obvious. They strike your eye. But Indiana nature speaks in whispers, requiring one to pause, take perspective, and perceive things that might be missed. Whitman was right that even a leaf of grass is wondrous. He wrote, "I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass." There's beauty even in the smallest detail. The next earth prayer is from the Chinook people of the American Northwest. We call upon the land which grows our food, the nurturing soil, the fertile fields, the abundant gardens and orchards, and we ask that they teach us and show us the way. Indiana. Corn and soybeans. Soybeans and corn. Every flat acre is soybeans or corn. Some stereotypes are true. Northern Indiana is mostly soybeans and corn. The agribusiness is an economic engine that supplies many calories to the world. But it's not the whole picture. I enjoy the farmers markets, the boutique popcorns, the family bakeries, and the culture that surrounds us, the fiddlers that gather in the spring. The disappearing family farms still exist in little patches between these wide expansions of factory farms. And it's being reinvented by those who are trying to make a new way out of the old. And even in these mega cornfields are sprouting a new plant, these windmills that capture carbon-free energy. And soybean, even geo-engineered soybean, bioengineered, is better for the land than cattle or pork. And so we debate, and we try things, and we learn from the land. May we continue to argue about how it should be used. May we continue to grow in understanding. The next prayer is a Buddhist prayer by Ihai Dogen. You should entreat the trees and rock to preach the Dharma, and you should ask the rice fields and gardens for the truth. The Dharma is the teachings, the truth, in Buddhist literature. I have looked for the trees of Indiana for wisdom and beauty. For wherever there are trees, the land has shape. For if the land was flat, the trees would be cut down and there would be corn or soybeans there. But trees mean a ravine or a river or a hill. Most often a ravine or a river, seldom a hill. It is Indiana after all. And one of the most beautiful is the Bear Creek Canyon by Portland Arch. South of Attica, The Bear Creek runs into the Wabash. It's not even as wide as one of these sets of pews. But it cuts a path 50 feet deep through the rock. The place is less crowded and thus more peaceful than Shade State Park. In some ways, because the trees are so overgrown, it's more beautiful. It's a real place to ask the trees and the rocks to preach the Dharma, to preach wisdom to you. The next is a Hindu prayer. O Lord, thou art on the sandbanks as well as in the midst of the current. I bow to thee. How could I talk about Indiana earth prayers without bowing to the mighty Wabash? The bending Wabash and this valley, and south of us the Wea Plain, is why people have settled here for centuries. It rises and falls. It has been a source of commerce and recreation. And I'm fascinated in how it always changes in size and it changes its riverbanks. It's truly alive. Eternal, yet ever-changing. I think a perfect metaphor for the divine. A stream of understanding. And sometimes when we're in the midst of it, it can be turbulent and confusing. And sometimes we observe it from the riverbank, and we can have a wider understanding, but we lose the passion of the experience. What is the true religious experience? Anywhere you choose. O Lord, thou art on the sacred banks as well as in the midst of the current. I bow to thee. The next prayer is from the transcendentalist writer Henry David Thoreau. The finest workers in stone are not copper or steel tools, but in the gentle touches of air and water, working at their leisure with a liberal allowance of time. North of Attica, there's another tributary to the Wabash, nestled quietly in the woods, running broad and shallow for most of its course, except for a narrow passage of rocks, where water is swirled and whirled and wriggles its way through, finding cracks and expanding them into crevices, dropping down into a hole and then waiting to overflow. Years of fits and starts, faults, paths, and blind eddies combined to form potholes, unique bathtubs in the river bottom. A prayer of creative perseverance. The next prayer is a Christian prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Be praised, my Lord, for brother wind, and for the air, and for cloudy days, and bright, and all days else. Because through these you give your creatures sustenance. When the land is flat, there is more sky to see, a wider skyscape of moving pictures, shadows, shaded from ominous thunderheads of Thor to angelic white feathers in the high sky. The sun and the moon crossing the stage, darting between the curtains of clouds. Tides, evaporation, respiration, precipitation, life. The next prayer is from the Chicago poet Carl Sandburg. Bless thee, O Lord, for the miracle of light to my eye and the mystery of it ever changing. The word divine comes from a Sanskrit root that just means one that shines. A diva, also from the same word. That sense of just the brilliance and miracle of light. The sunrise and sunset angles bring refractions of satisfaction, a spectrum of experience, with colors beyond recognition that shift subtly before one can name them. And photographs always distort. For the camera contains no mind that is awestruck, no emotion longing for a soul. The next prayer is from the Hebrew scripture, the Song of Solomon. Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. For lo, the winter is past, and the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. Walking down Smiley Street, that glorified alley, 2 blocks from church, I find a sacred space. A pantheon of blossoms. Lisa's wild garden. Torrid, florid, eye-popping poppies, an opioid opulence, flourishing fragrance, hallucinatory hues. The gardener choreographs a land of 1,000 dancers, improvisation, pollinization, fertilization. New blooms come into seasons as others face expiration, and final dispensation to compost compilation. All summer long, the variety show continues. A world of flowers dance across the small backyard. I know I could never work so hard to grow beautiful flowers that are certain to die. But I think it's the beauty that keeps her alive. So I steal pictures of the beauty she shares and worship her garden as she works unaware. Last prayer comes from Thomas Transtromer. I do not know what tradition he is from. Tired of all who come with words, words but not language, I went to the snow-covered island. The wild does not have words, language, but no words. I moved to Indiana in part because I missed winter. Now that it is April, I am glad that winter, cross our fingers, appears to be gone. But there is a stillness of winter, a peace beyond words. And I gaze upon its stillness, and I try to remember it always. I leave you with this photo of Indiana's highest and often driest falls in Williamsport, Indiana. It's a tiny, tiny creek that dries up several times a year, and there's no waterfall, but if you catch it at the right time, it overflows. And this time in winter, it had formed an island underneath. And I wanted us to just take a small moment, a few moments, to look at this picture and let the words tumble out of our mind like water and listen for the language of nature and pray an earth prayer. May we bless and be blessed. And I invite Blue Moon Rising back up.